My 4-year-old daughter crawled to me, missing 3 fingers, and whispered who did it. Hey Cheating Tales Lab viewers, where in the world are you tuning in from? We want to know. Give us a shout. Let's jump right into today's story. Chapter 1. The Soldier's Shadow. James Walker was a master of precision. 15 years in the Army, Rangers stripped away all softness, revealing pure steel beneath the flesh. At 38, his broad shoulders bore more than just muscle. They carried the burden of 3 tours in Afghanistan, endless covert missions, and a steadfast conviction that loyalty was the ultimate currency in this realm. The transport helicopter's rotors thumped overhead as Marshall shifted his duffel bag, eyes locked on the familiar landscape of Fort Bragg disappearing beneath him. His rough hands clutched a faded photograph of Hannah with their 4-year-old daughter Sophia on her first day of preschool. Hannah's auburn hair shimmered in the sunlight, her smile bright as she gazed at their little girl. Sophia, sporting her mother's green eyes and Marshall's stubborn chin, flashed a toothless grin at the camera. "Daddy will be home soon, baby girl," he whispered to the photo, his voice gritty from months of barking orders against the desert winds. Marshall's phone buzzed with a text from his neighbor, Sam Mitchell. "Welcome home party at 1800. Hannah has been strategizing for weeks. Sophia won't stop raving about it." Marshall's mouth curled up at the corners, the nearest thing to a smile he'd mustered in months. Dick was a solid guy, a retired Marine who truly grasped the bond of service. He monitored Marshall's family throughout the deployment, sending quick updates that all was well. But Hannah's recent calls felt different. Her voice had an odd distance, and she was vague about the details of their daily life. During their last video call 2 weeks ago, Hannah said Sophia was sleeping, even though it was midday. Marshall brushed aside his doubts, though the excuse rang hollow. Deployment paranoia ran rampant, with husbands conjuring up non-existent problems. The plane landed at Pope Army Airfield, afternoon shadows racing across the tarmac. Marshall's mind raced with thoughts of his surprise arrival. He told Hannah he'd be away for another week, planning to surprise her and Sophia. His daughter's face lighting up when she saw him fueled him through customs and the taxi ride to his modest 2-story house in Fayetteville. As the cab rolled into his driveway, Marshall spotted Kyle Foster's black Escalade parked across the street. Brian, Hannah's childhood friend from Georgia, is a smooth-talking insurance salesman who just moved to town 6 months ago. Marshall had a quick encounter with him at a barbecue before deployment. Marshall felt a jolt of unease from the man's too wide smile and lingering gaze on Hannah, but he brushed it off as mere territorial instincts. Marshall paid the driver, grabbed his duffel bag, and stepped onto the concrete walkway he had built himself 3 summers back, his boots making no sound. The front door stood unlocked, a rare slip for security-minded Hannah. Maybe she'd let her guard down while he was away. The house had a different vibe, chillier. Marshall dropped his bag in the entryway, instantly noticing the missing family photos that used to adorn the hallway walls. That Sophia's artwork vanished from the fridge door, leaving a silence that thudded against his eardrums like deep water. "Hannah," he whispered, careful not to alarm anyone. "Sophia," a muffled sound echoed from upstairs, a chilling whimper that froze his blood. Marshall bounded up the stairs, 3 steps at a time, his tactical training kicking in full force. A faint, fractured sound echoed from Sophia's room once more. He swung the door open and spotted his daughter curled up in the corner of her bed, gripping the stuffed elephant he'd sent from Afghanistan. What sent his world spinning was her left hand. 3 fingers gone, stumps wrapped in blood-stained gauze. "Sophia!" Marshall's voice broke as he hurried to her side. Her head shot up, green eyes wide with terror that quickly shifted to desperate hope. "Daddy?" she whispered, then called out louder, "Daddy!" Marshall swept her up, his chest tightening as she pressed her face into his shoulder. She felt fragile, like a bird with broken wings. "Daddy, you're back!" Sophia cried, clinging to his neck. "Mommy said you went down screaming like a coward in battle. She claimed the bad men hurt you, and you couldn't rescue me." Every word pierced like a knife, cutting deep. Marshall clenched his jaw, fighting to keep his voice steady as fury churned like a storm inside him. "I'm here, baby girl. Dad's here. What happened to your hand?" Sophia pulled back, her tiny face marked by tears. Brian, Mommy's friend, he was furious when I spilled juice on his shoes. He called me clumsy just like you, Dad. He led me to the garage, and she grazed the bandaged stumps. He grabbed the big garden scissors, the ones meant for the rose bushes. Marshall's vision blurred with a crimson hue. Snip, snip, garden shears. The twisted monster used garden shears on a 4-year-old child. His girl. His daughter. Where's Mommy at? Marshall inquired, his voice chillingly low. She's at Brian's place. She crashes there almost every night now. She said you weren't coming back. So Brian's my new daddy now. Sophia's voice cracked once more. I'm not looking for a new daddy, I want you now. Marshall pulled his daughter tight, his mind racing into the cold, sharp focus that had seen him through countless missions. This was neither Afghanistan nor Iraq. This felt like home. This was family. This was a betrayal that called for epic revenge. Sophia, sweetheart, listen closely, Marshall said, pulling back to meet her gaze. Daddy's here to keep you safe, always. Got it? She nodded, trust gleaming in her tear-filled eyes. Great. I'm calling Uncle Dick to stay with you while Daddy handles a few things. Can you hold on to your courage just a bit longer? I've been brave for a long time, Daddy, Sophia said, her voice carrying a weight beyond her years. Marshall's heart shattered, then reformed, harder, colder. As he grabbed his phone to call Dick, a chilling thought rang in his mind. No one lays a finger on my daughter and walks away unscathed. Chapter 2. Blood and Lies. Sam Mitchell rushed in just 10 minutes after the marshal's call, his expression serious and hands trembling as he assessed Sophia's injuries. The old Marine locked eyes with Marshall over the child's head, a silent exchange sparking between them, an unspoken bond forged in the fires of war. Wow, Marshall, Dick whispered as they dashed into the hallway. How long has this been happening? I'll uncover that, Marshall shot back, his voice sharp and steely. Will you stick around with her? I've got some business to take care of. Dick nodded, a grim expression on his face. Of course. I will. What's the plan, Marshall? Marshall's smile could slice through glass. Time for a chat with my wife. Before heading out, Marshall dropped to his knees next to Sophia's bed, where Dick was engrossed in a story for her. His daughter's bandaged hand lay on her stuffed elephant, igniting fresh waves of rage within him. Sophia. Hey, I need to ask you something important, Marshall said gently. Did Brian hurt you anywhere else besides your fingers? Sophia's face twisted, and she nodded slowly. She lifted her pajama shirt, exposing circular burn marks on her ribs. Cigarette burns, sharp and intentional. Marshall spotted 7, each a chilling mark of calculated cruelty. It's punishment for being bad, Sophia whispered. Mommy observed. She claimed I earned it for not calling Brian Daddy. Sam Mitchell whispered a prayer and a curse all at once. Marshall nodded, locking away every detail in his mind, trained to remember all, forget nothing, and strategize effectively. Marshall's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Surprise party kicks off in 30 minutes. Hannah can't wait to see you. Deanna. Deanna Glass is Hannah's sister. The charade was still in full swing. Absolutely. Marshall pressed his lips to Sophia's forehead. Uncle Dick's got a safe spot for you while Dad takes care of business. You won't ever have to see Brian again. I promise. The drive to Kyle Foster's house zipped by in just 12 minutes, weaving through oak-lined streets and charming white picket fences. Marshall had completed his reconnaissance naturally. Before his last deployment, he made it a point to learn everything about his family's new neighbors and acquaintances. Brian resided in a flashy McMansion in Haymount, a house that shouted new money and insecurity. Marshall parked a few houses away and kept a close watch. He spotted people bustling around through the big front windows. The surprise party was in full swing. He spotted a few familiar faces. Hannah's sister Deanna, her husband Neil Campbell, and some family friends. Everyone played along in the charade, all pretending Hannah wasn't a child-abusing adulteress. Marshall darted around to the back of the house, gliding through the shadows like a seasoned pro. The rear sliding door was wide open, Careless security that would come back to bite. He darted into the kitchen, taking in the sleek appliances and stunning granite countertops. Whatever Brian's job was, it brought in the cash. Voices floated in from the front of the house. Marshall tracked the sound, his boots whispering on the hardwood floors. He crouched behind the half-wall dividing the kitchen and living room, eyes locked on the scene like a predator eyeing its prey. Hannah stood by the fireplace, rocking a stunning red dress that Marshall had never seen before. Her auburn hair was styled shorter and more sophisticated. She was stunning, completely unfamiliar, like a stranger donning his wife's face. Kyle Foster casually wrapped his arm around her waist, a beer in his other hand. Deanna thinks Marshall might arrive early. He was always a wild card. He won't, Hannah said, her confidence making Marshall's jaw tighten. His flight lands next Tuesday. Even if he came home early, he'd head straight to the house first. We'll get ample notice. Brian's chuckle grated on Marshall's nerves. Chill out, babe. Even if G.I. Joe arrives, what's his next move? You're going for that divorce anyway. I've already discussed the custody situation with my lawyer. Which custody situation are we talking about? Neil Campbell inquired. Brian smiled, but his eyes told a different story. Sophia has been having some accidents lately, a few ER visits and some mysterious injuries. The poor kid's been super clumsy since her dad deployed. If this pattern keeps up, child services may need to step in. Marshall's fists tightened. The jerk was crafting a paper trail, spinning a tale that would portray Sophia as clumsy while clearing himself and Hannah of any blame. It was a masterful play, showcasing skill and strategy. That's terrible, Deanna said, but her tone hinted at hidden knowledge. Perhaps Sophia needs a more stable father figure. Hannah gave a quick nod. Brian's been amazing with her. He's instilling discipline and respect in her, qualities Marshall overlooked during his constant deployments. Discipline, Marshall muttered, his mind racing to the cigarette burns on his daughter's ribs. Brian drew Hannah in, his hand gliding down her hip. The kid's got talent, but she requires strong guidance. Marshall was overly soft and permissive. That's why she's so rebellious now. Hannah, bold enough to splash juice on your new shoes, laughed, her sound slicing through the air like broken glass in Marshall's ears. Kids pick up lessons quickly when real consequences are at stake, Brian said. Believe me, she won't mess up like that again. Marshall had heard it all and then some. He emerged from the shadows, gliding into the living room with the eerie elegance of death. This is cozy, Marshall said softly. The conversation fizzled out immediately. Hannah's face flashed from white to red and back to white. Kyle Foster gripped his beer bottle, his body coiling like a trapped beast. The other guests gaped, their faces a mix of shock, embarrassment, and fear. Marshall, Hannah gasped, hand flying to her chest. You're here ahead of schedule. Surprise, Marshall said, his voice icy and devoid of warmth. His eyes darted from one person to another, assessing reactions, positions, and potential threats. Dangerous places breed old habits. Brian moved ahead, keeping his arm wrapped around Hannah. Hey, soldier. Home sweet home. We were simply... Marshall wrapped it up with a celebration. Got it. Hey, Brian. How long have you been with my wife? The vulgarity slammed into the room, a punch to the gut. Deanna inhaled sharply. Neil sputtered on his drink. Brian's expression shifted, a mix of anger and something else. Fear, perhaps, or cold calculation. Listen up, buddy. Brian shot back, his voice sharp and intense. You can't simply... 8 months. Hannah shot back, her chin lifting defiantly. 8 months. Marshall. No regrets here. The admission lingered, toxic and suffocating. Marshall nodded slowly, like she was validating a weather forecast. 8 months, he said again. Perfect timing. That's when Sophia began experiencing her incidents. Brian narrowed his eyes. What do you mean? Marshall stepped closer, relaxed yet exuding lethal potential. No implications here. I'm laying down the facts. First off, my daughter is missing 3 fingers. She has 7 cigarette burns on her torso. She revealed exactly how she got those injuries and who was responsible. Silence enveloped the room. broken only by the rhythmic tick of an ornate grandfather clock. Brian's face flashed with surprise, anger, calculation, and then settled into cold determination. "You've always been a paranoid bastard," Brian finally said. "That kid's been spinning tales since day one." "She's shaken, Marshall. Likely due to an absent, abusive father." "Abusive father?" Marshall mused at us. "That the story you're sticking to?" Candace stepped up, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and fury. "Marshall, it's time to go. Welcome to Brian's house." "Just kidding, you're not welcome here." Marshall's smile was a sight to dread. "You're spot on, Candace. This is Brian's place, and you're spot on. I'm not welcome here." He paused, stretching the moment. "I'm not going anywhere until we have a full discussion about my daughter's injuries. Every single one. Thoroughly." The threat in his voice was clear, and Brian must have sensed it because his hand twitched toward his waistband. A hint that he was hiding something. "I think this party's done," Brian said cautiously. "Let's all head home and tackle this later when things have cooled down." "Feelings?" Marshall's laugh shattered the silence like a bone-snapping. "Brother, you haven't witnessed my emotions yet, but you will." He faced the room, ready to speak. Deanna, Neil, and the rest. Not a soul stirred for a heartbeat. Deanna snatched her purse. "Marshall, think twice before you act. No regrets here." Marshall kept his gaze locked on Brian as he replied. However, that's not the case for everyone else. Guests rushed out, leaving Marshall, Hannah, and Brian alone in the now spacious living room. Engines roared to life and vanished into the night. "All right then," Marshall said with a smile. "Let's dive into consequences." Chapter 3: The Art of War. The silence in Kyle Foster's living room hung thick, poised to break. Marshall stood motionless, hands at his sides, as Brian and Hannah huddled by the fireplace like trapped animals craving safety in numbers. "Marshall, let me break it down for you." Hannah started, her voice shifting to that familiar pleading tone from her days of small lies. Forgotten anniversaries, small buys, innocent lies that now feel trivial next to this betrayal. "What do you mean, exactly?" Marshall inquired, keeping it casual. "How could you allow your boyfriend to hurt our 4-year-old daughter? How did you break the news to her that I was dead? So, how have you been cashing in on my death benefits while I was out there dodging IEDs in Afghanistan?" Brian's hand crept toward his waistband once more. Marshall kept his gaze locked on his wife, tracking the movement out of the corner of his eye. "I never intended for Sophia to be hurt," Hannah exclaimed, tears streaming down her face. "Brian was just trying to discipline her, but she was being a real challenge." "Hold up." Marshall's voice sliced through her words sharply. "Cut the chatter. At this moment." His commanding tone, shaped by years of leading men in life-or-death scenarios, had an instant impact. Hannah's mouth clamped shut, her eyes wide with a fear she'd never witnessed in her husband before. Marshall whipped out his phone, raising it for both to see the screen. "I've been recording this chat since I stepped in. Every single word. Each confession. Every report of child abuse. It's uploaded to a secure server and sent to 3 law enforcement agencies." Brian's face turned pale. "That's illegal. You can't record people without consent." "North Carolina is a one-party consent state," Marshall said coolly. "I can capture any conversation I'm in. This conversation touches on the systematic abuse of my daughter, and I believe the authorities will want to know all the details." Hannah plopped into a chair, the reality of her situation crashing down on her. "Marshall, now, let's figure this out. Let's hit up counseling." "Absolutely, we can. Therapy." Marshall's laugh lacked any trace of humor. "Hannah, you saw a man slice off your daughter's fingers with garden shears. You took part in burning her with cigarettes. You said I was dead just to crush her spirit. This can't be resolved." Brian sprang into action, his hand darting for the gun at his waistband with lightning speed. But Marshall was ready for it. Before Brian could even grasp the grip, Marshall was already on the move. 15 years of combat training distilled into 3 seconds of pure, explosive action. Marshall seized Brian's wrist with his left hand and slammed an elbow into his solar plexus with his right. Brian bent over, breathless, as Marshall swiftly took his weapon away. A Glock 19, one round ready to go. Marshall inspected the Glock 19 with sharp precision. Great pick. Trustworthy, straightforward, impactful. He ejected the magazine, cleared the chamber, and flung the pieces away. Absolutely, but it only works if you can actually draw it. Brian knelt, gasping for air, clutching his chest tightly. Hannah sank into the chair, trying to blend into the upholstery. "Here's the plan," Marshall said, his voice steady and precise, just like in mission briefings. "Hannah, grab one bag and let's get out of here tonight. Stay away from Sophia. Don't come near our home, and don't mess with the divorce process." "Marshall, she's my daughter as well." "Negative." The word struck hard, like a punch. Mothers never stand by while their children suffer. Mothers are not involved in abuse. You lost any right to that title the instant you picked this garbage over your own child. Marshall focused on Brian, who was back on his feet but still gasping for breath. "And you're about to vanish. Tonight. Forever. You can't threaten me." Brian gasped. "I'm calling the police now." "You'll do nothing," Marshall cut in. "If you stay like this and come within 100 miles of my daughter again, I will hunt you down and make you regret ever waking up." His voice held a promise, and Brian clearly sensed it. His face flashed from bravado to calculation, then settled into pure fear. Marshall fished a tiny GPS tracker from his pocket, no larger than a coin. "Check out this top-tier military surveillance gear. Totally undetectable, entirely untraceable, and highly effective at distances of up to 50 miles. I've got 6 more just like it." He flung the tracker to Brian, who snagged it instinctively. "That's your parole officer," Marshall pressed on. "If it ever turns back toward North Carolina and my family, I'll be ready. I'll be coming for you." "This is insane," Brian exclaimed, though his voice betrayed doubt. "You can't simply— What can't you do?" "Keep my daughter safe. Guarantee her safety." "It looks like you think the usual rules are in play here." "They absolutely don't." Marshall's smile was icy. "For 15 years, I've mastered the art of hunting, capturing, and neutralizing threats to national security. You're just another mark." Hannah rediscovered her voice. "Marshall, now. Consider your actions carefully. Consider Sophia. She craves stability. She can't see either of you again," Marshall stated bluntly. "She requires therapy, medical care, and time to recover from the trauma you both caused. She definitely doesn't need parents who believe garden shears are suitable for discipline." Marshall whipped out his phone once more, revealing a fresh screen. "I've been on the go while we've been chatting. Child Protective Services has been alerted. The FBI's been alerted. When one parent is military, child abuse across state lines turns into a federal issue. The JAG Corps has been alerted as this impacts my security clearance and deployment status." He flicked to a new screen. "Hannah, your sister Deanna just got a super intriguing package about 10 minutes ago. Images of Sophia's injuries, audio clips of tonight's confessions, and a precise timeline of events. She's likely on the phone with your mom right now." Hannah's face twisted in distress. Her family's opinion meant everything to her. Her greatest weakness fueled her constant craving for approval and status. Brian's insurance agency got a similar package. Marshall pressed on. "In small communities, word spreads like wildfire. His business is set to get really exciting in the coming weeks." Brian's face shifted from pale to a sickly green. His insurance business thrived on reputation and trust. Commodities that vanished fast when child abuse allegations emerged. "You want to take us down?" Brian said. "No," Marshall shot back. "I need to keep my daughter safe. Taking you down is just a bonus." Marshall strode to the front window and glanced through the blinds. "Brian, you've got 30 minutes to pack everything you can into your car. Next, I dive into calls with people who are way less reasonable than I am." "Which people?" Hannah inquired. Marshall's smile sent chills down spines. "Guess what? 3 of my army buddies are just a short drive away. Jake Krause operates a private security firm in Raleigh. Ralph Best is part of a company that excels in asset recovery, both legal and otherwise. Derek Schultz just left the Corps and is on the hunt for freelance gigs. He took a moment for that to register. These are men who've spent years in zones where justice is counted in brass casings and body bags. They possess unique skills and show unwavering loyalty to their friends' families, especially when those families have injured kids. Brian dashed toward the stairs, survival instincts kicking in, leaving pride behind. Hannah sat frozen in the chair, tears racing down her cheeks. "Marshall, please," she whispered urgently. "I've made mistakes, but Sophia is still my everything. I'm crazy about her." Marshall dropped to one knee beside her chair, his voice softening for the first time that night. "Hannah, I get it, you think you love her. Love doesn't hurt kids with cigarettes. Love doesn't sever bonds. Love doesn't pick abusive boyfriends over innocent daughters." He rose, his expression tightening once more. 8 months to make your choice, Sophia. 8 months to shield her, to ditch Brian, to embrace motherhood. You opted to join in her torment. Every choice comes with a price. Frantic packing echoed from upstairs. Marshall glanced at his watch. Brian thrived under pressure, driven by fear. Great. Efficiency will streamline this transition for all. What's next? Hannah inquired. Now you both vanish from our lives. Marshall stated plainly. Sophia receives the therapy and medical care she requires. I file for divorce and full custody, and we all move forward with our lives. What if we stick around? Marshall's face was stoic, but his eyes held a power that made Hannah retreat into her chair. Then I stopped being reasonable, he declared. Trust me, Hannah, you definitely don't want to witness unreasonable in action. Chapter 4 Ghosts and Shadows. 3 days after the showdown at Brian's house, Marshall waited in the sterile Cape Fear Valley health system, anxiously while Sophia faced her 3rd medical exam. The doctors aimed to record it all. Missing fingers, cigarette burns, psychological trauma. Every examination was essential, yet it felt like another blow to his daughter's innocence. Dr. Patricia Cahill, a skilled pediatric surgeon with kind eyes and steady hands, stepped out of the examination room and sat down next to Marshall. Sophia described the damage to her fingers as precise. This was a calculated move, targeting precise areas for maximum impact while steering clear of major blood vessels. It's not the act of someone fueled by anger. Marshall clenched his jaw, thought out in advance. Absolutely, that's my take. The burns are cleverly positioned, concealed by clothing, intended to inflict pain without leaving visible scars. This resonates with someone skilled in orchestrating controlled trauma. Dr. Cahill passed Marshall a folder. I've got all the documentation ready for the legal proceedings. Listen, Marshall, you need to get this. Sophia will require intensive therapy. Physical wounds will heal, but the psychological scars? Those will take time. What's the time frame? Probably years. That's with expert support and a solid setting. Young children facing intentional cruelty from their parents. It completely transforms their perspective on the world. Marshall scanned the medical photos in the folder, each image searing into his memory. Sophia's tiny hands, her scarred torso, her eyes held a haunted look throughout the examination. Proof of relentless cruelty that ignited his fury for a lifetime. Dr. Cahill pressed on with more. In our psychological evaluation, Sophia brought up additional incidents. Events that unfolded during your deployment prior to the finger incident. This abuse has been ramping up for months. What incidents are we talking about? Stuck in closets or the basement for hours, total isolation. Food deprivation, punished with missed meals for minor infractions. Emotional manipulation hits hard. Being told you're dead, that you abandoned her, that she's worthless. Every revelation struck Marshall like a punch to the gut. While he served his country, trusting his wife to safeguard their daughter, Sophia endured a nightmare that spiraled into mutilation. Marshall's phone buzzed with a message from Sam Mitchell. Package delivered on point. Video received and confirmed. Marshall tasked Dick with delivering evidence copies to key figures, not just authorities, but also community members who needed the truth before Hannah and Brian could spin their own story. Dr. Cahill, I've got a question for you, Marshall said. How prevalent is this type of systematic abuse? More frequent than we care to acknowledge. Typically, it features a custodial parent and a romantic partner who sees the child as competition or a hurdle. The abuse has two goals: controlling the child and showcasing dominance over the custodial parent. Brian was taking charge, asserting his dominance over Sophia and Hannah. That aligns perfectly with the patterns we've observed. Why did your wife join in instead of shielding Sophia? Marshall was thinking the exact same thing. The Hannah he married 8 years ago was nurturing, protective, and fiercely maternal. The woman who witnessed Brian mutilate their daughter was a different person, or maybe a hidden side of her, waiting for the perfect moment to surface. The phone buzzed. Jake Krause, one of the army buddies he'd told Brian about, popped up on the caller ID. Marshall dashed outside to take the call. "Got your message, Marshall." Jake's voice crackled with barely contained fury. "Tell me you didn't just let that jerk walk away. He's outta here. I left town that very night after confronting him. Where'd they go? His car tracker shows he's in South Carolina. Looks like it's on a path to Florida. And the wife, Hannah, is crashing at her sister's place in Wilmington. She's reached out to a divorce attorney but hasn't attempted to see Sophia or meddle in the custody issue." Jake paused, lost in thought. "Listen, Marshall, there are definitely ways to make sure they're not an issue anymore. Enduring solutions." The offer crackled with tension between them. Marshall had known Jake for 12 years, serving alongside him in Afghanistan. Jake was a doer, a man who tackled problems head-on and sought clear solutions. His security firm hired many ex-military personnel who embraced that philosophy. "Thanks for the offer," Marshall said, treading lightly. "I've got this covered." "Are you certain? If that guy ever shows up again, if he even thinks about your little girl, I'll take care of it myself," Marshall declared. "Hey Jake, I could use some tech help with the surveillance issue. Get legal help now. Anything you need." Ralph Best knows the legal scene, while Derek Schultz operates a sharp monitoring setup. We can monitor both of them endlessly. Once the call ended, Marshall re-entered the hospital and spotted Sophia in the waiting room with child psychologist Jessica Dixon. Sophia sketched vibrant pictures with her uninjured hand, haunting, unsettling visuals that echoed the turmoil within her youthful psyche. "Dad?" Sophia called as soon as she spotted him. "Dr. Jessica suggests I express my feelings through drawing. Yet my pictures keep turning out scary." Marshall dropped to his knees next to her chair, scrutinizing the drawings. A stick figure in a garage, encircled by towering figures wielding sharp objects. A house with windows like eyes and a door like a screaming mouth came to life. Black scribbles filled the whole page. Dr. Dixon explained that drawing scary pictures is totally fine. Art therapy empowers children to tackle trauma head-on. Sophia is sharing her feelings positively. Marshall examined his daughter's face. Still stunning, even after the struggle. Still pure, no matter what she faced. Sophia. Sweetness. Remember those tales Daddy spun about brave knights battling monsters to protect the people? Sophia nodded, her expression serious. Daddy's like a knight. My mission: ensure those monsters never threaten you again. Can you believe that? Absolutely, Daddy. What if the monsters return? Marshall's face turned steely. Then Daddy will take on the monsters like a true knight. Doctor. Dixon raised an eyebrow at the exchange. Marshall shrugged it off. His daughter craved safety. The only way to guarantee her safety was to show that threats would face overwhelming force. That evening, after dropping Sophia off at Dixon's house for another night, Marshall rushed back to his own home for the first time since uncovering her injuries. The house felt empty, tainted by the memories of what transpired in his absence. He swept through each room, quickly collecting proof of Hannah's betrayal and Sophia's pain. In Sophia's room, he discovered the first aid supplies used for her injuries: gauze, antiseptic, pain relief, concealed in a shoebox under her bed. Her injuries hinted at a deliberate cover. Up in the master bedroom, Marshall found proof of Brian's long stay: men's clothes, toiletries, and a backup key for his Escalade. Unbelievable levels of comfort and presumption. Brian was involved in more than just an affair with Hannah. He lived in Marshall's house, slept in his bed, and tormented his daughter. Marshall's phone buzzed. An unknown number calling. He replied carefully. "Sergeant Wallace." Agent Andrea Sampson here, FBI. I've noted your report of a child abuse case with federal implications. Absolutely. Let's set up an interview with you and your daughter. We need to review the evidence and decide on the next steps for charges. Marshall felt a dark thrill. The wheels of justice were starting to turn, but at a snail's pace. His wheels spin at lightning speed. Agent Sampson, the main suspect, has bolted out of state. I think he's in Florida right now. We've got the apprehension covered, Sergeant. Promise me you won't go after the suspects alone. Okay? Marshall fell silent for a moment. I assure you, I won't break any laws. It wasn't the promise Agent Sampson wanted, but it was the only one Marshall could honestly give. He wouldn't break any laws, but he'd use every legal tactic available to make sure Kyle Foster and Hannah Wallace never threatened his daughter again. If they dared to come back, if they even thought about hurting Sophia again. There were many legal ways to tackle threats head-on. Marshall had to think outside the box. With the phone call over, Marshall sprang into action, plotting his next move. Phase 1. Documentation and legal proceedings are in full swing. Phase 2 demands finesse, patience, and sharp strategic thinking, the very skills that kept him alive through 3 combat deployments. Kyle Foster and Hannah Wallace believed they could escape into new lives, leaving Sophia's trauma in the rearview like a bad dream. They were about to discover just how mistaken they truly were. James Walker held onto every enemy and never let a threat to his family slide. Chapter 5. The Hunter's Patience. 2 weeks after Hannah and Brian left, Marshall found himself in his attorney Lloyd Clark's office, poring over divorce papers that felt like a military operation. Sharp, thorough, and crafted for complete triumph, Lloyd, a former JAG officer, grasped the legal intricacies and emotional stakes of cases like this. Lloyd exclaimed, spreading the evidence across his mahogany desk. I've never seen documentation this thorough. Medical records, audio clips, video confessions, witness accounts, FBI reports. Marshall, you've built a case strong enough to nail them in criminal court, not to mention family court. I want full custody, Marshall shot back. Complete parental rights, no visitation for Hannah, and a restraining order protecting Sophia, me, and any future family. Got plans for a family ahead? Marshall's face clouded over. I want to ensure that if I remarry, Sophia's future stepmother or siblings are safe from any retaliation. Lloyd nodded, a grim expression on his face. Got it. How will the property be divided? Hannah gets half the house value and half our savings. I want it all. Sophia's college fund, my military benefits, the vehicles, and every piece of personal property. That's quite generous given the situation. It's strategic, Marshall shot back. I want this divorce to be swift and discreet. The longer it takes, the more chances they get to stir up trouble. Money doesn't matter, plain and simple. Sophia is essential. Lloyd's phone buzzed, and he picked it up, frowning. Absolutely, connect her now. He glanced at Marshall. Hannah's lawyer here. They're looking to hash out custody arrangements. Marshall flashed a sharp smile. Inform them we're ready to accept their unconditional surrender. Otherwise, it's court time. As Lloyd took the call, Marshall quickly scanned updates from his surveillance network. Jake Krause kept his promise. Kyle Foster was under constant surveillance by a team of private investigators with military expertise. Round the clock. The reports were a captivating read. Brian zoomed straight to Tampa, Florida, checking into a budget motel under an alias. He connected with Mario Cotton, an old associate running a small-time loan sharking operation. Brian aimed to carve out a fresh start in Florida, likely gearing up for a new identity and business venture. Unbeknownst to Brian, Mario Cotton was already on the FBI's radar for federal racketeering charges. Brian's connection would instantly raise red flags, a detail Marshall made sure to leak to the right ears through discreet tips. Hannah was crashing with her sister Deanna in Wilmington, but family tensions were skyrocketing. Marshall's evidence drop ignited a firestorm in the Glass family. Alma Lindsay completely disowned her daughter Hannah after witnessing the shocking photos of Sophia's injuries. Her father warned he would file assault charges if Hannah reached out again. Marshall got the social isolation he craved. Hannah, lacking family support and financial resources, was spiraling into desperation and instability. Desperate people screw up. Unstable individuals made larger blunders. Lloyd wrapped up his call and dove back into the documents.